You're listening to RevOps FM with Justin Norris. Welcome to RevOps FM, everyone. We're continuing our series today looking at truly unified RevOps teams that support all the GTM functions of the business, from marketing to sales to customer success. And the goal here really is to understand better how this unified structure can work, the advantages it brings, and of course, any challenges as well. And today we're speaking with Danielle Marquis, who is VP of Revenue Operations at Zappi, where she's been for nearly 5.5 years. And Danielle, I was studying your LinkedIn profile and noticed you've actually been in the RevOps world for 15 years this month, if my math is correct, which is incredible.
Yep.
So I'm really interested to dig into how the RevOps space has evolved during that time as well. So first off, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to dig in on this.
Maybe we can just start with that place, because I noticed your first role, I think Sales Operations Analyst, 2009. Now here you are 15 years later, June of 2024. Talk to me about how the RevOps space, such as it is, has evolved. I don't think that term was even around in 2009, but what does that journey look like for you?
Definitely not. The more networking and events I go to and folks I meet and talk about RevOps, the more I realize I've had a more unique path. Ironically, it's always been in the sales, marketing, ops space, but a lot of folks now in RevOps didn't start there. So really, I graduated college and didn't have a job to pay for grad school or my apartment in Boston. So I got this contractor role. It was moving files from one intranet to their new intranet, really sexy work there. And I finished that work pretty early. So they started having me do data loads into Salesforce. And so I was still on an hourly contractor wage at this point. And probably not a lot of people tell you they fell in love with Salesforce via doing data loads and data cleansing. But for me, I had done an IT minor. I had started grad classes that were focusing on process optimization, and I started really seeing all the pieces come together, which was fascinating to me. I always thought I would get into actual sales. My PI definitely always was a sales indicator. But for me, I always fell in love with the back end and how we could make the workflows the sales reps were doing more and more efficient and really hit on the goals we were trying to drive. Some of those first data loads I was doing was literally, we called them Blitz Wednesdays, and we would load 20 leads into each sales rep's queue. And once they got through those on cold calling, we'd load more into their queues. And I was like, this does not seem like an efficient nor effective way. We're not capturing what's happening to these leads. I just keep dumping more leads in. So that's where I really got curious. I joined as many networking groups as I could that were mainly for sales management at the time. And around that time, marketing automation started to come to fruition. Not anything like it is today either. But, the first tools were coming out and they were taking the concepts of a sales CRM and applying it to marketing. And then I think it's a really ironic thing that we've seen in the past probably 8 years that come back to sales as sales engagement tools. Everything we came out with thought leadership and nurture campaigns is all coming back into workflow management for sales. So it's kind of a fun, cool, interconnected circle. But yeah, that's how I got started. And then as each of those different go-to-market teams started realizing the power of having an operational-minded, tech-minded, data-minded person on their team supporting them to get to those strategic goals. And the more you saw those spaces growing. And I think naturally we can talk into like how that fully came back into the RevOps space, but that's how I at least came up here.
I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Knack. I love marketing automation software, but let's be honest, the email and landing page builders are usually terrible. You can't make it nice without a developer, and marketers are going to find a way to break things or go off brand. You do not have time for that. So Knack is totally different. You set the guidelines and then give your users a building experience that's slick, modern, and beautiful. When they're done, everything goes to your map at the push of a button. And don't worry, it supports global teams, approval workflows. It's got your integrations. So head on over to revops.fm/knack. That's KNAK, and get a special offer just for my listeners. It's funny, I remember vividly in my first operations job, essentially rebuilding a CRM through CSVs and data loads. And it was one of the most stressful things I've ever done, like updating thousands and thousands of activities and reparenting them. And so it must be some kind of sadistic rite of passage for operations people to have to do that.
I'm 15 years in and I'm a vice president. And I have the whole department, and my team will hear me say, don't worry, I'll cleanse that section of data. I needed something to do this afternoon that wasn't like totally mind intensive.
Just relax, kick back and relax. Good. Along that journey, do you recall perhaps at what point this notion of like RevOps entered the chat? Because it's kind of obviously, as in all things in this space, sort of like a rebranding, and vendors are using it, but there is a real thing there, I think, whether we call it RevOps or GTM Ops, we could talk about that. But do you recall when that sort of bubbled to the surface?
Yeah, I know for, at least on my path, I had exposure to those other areas of operations. And as I started taking on new, larger roles, around the time I started at Carbonite, which I think that was like 2000, maybe 15. Around that time, I came in, they needed a sales ops hire. I had been working previously for Iron Mountain doing just Salesforce business analyst work. So I got exposed to a lot of different teams and with the needs those teams had. And I realized a lot of the outcomes they were trying to drive could be solved with similar workflows or processes I had been trying to optimize for sales. So when I moved over to Carbonite and I had to stand up a sales ops department, it had just gone from B2C to B2B, and they were still doing a lot of consumer purchase tactics. And so I focused on obviously helping stand up the sales team and what that would look like, making sure the CRM was actually producing value for the company. And when I got there, I don't think anyone had logged into it. They just had this automated lead flow thing. And then their manager would literally Skype the incoming leads to someone else in Skype and have them call. And there was no tracking of any of this. So got them to actually use the CRM, use it for their own good, not just more admin work. And then I started realizing we were having really a lot of trouble getting the top of funnel in. And I was like, what are we doing on the marketing side? And there was really no one focused on B2B marketing strategies or techniques. They were still blowing a ton of advertising money on public radio and all the things that worked really well to make them the big company as a consumer brand. And so I learned everything I could about marketing automation, thought leadership, what marketing ops really looks like, and started building that out. So that was my first clicking moment, was at Carbonite. And then I started to see that grow throughout my networking events, talking to other operational professionals who were having challenges. Like, I'm doing all this cool stuff over on the sales side, but I don't feel like I have the same counterpart on marketing. So it's a disconnected, we're driving a really great lead process, but we're not getting the right volume or the right kind of leads, and we don't have any insight into that. So I'd say around 2013, you started seeing maybe some bubbles. I really think COVID probably had the real tipping point for calling it RevOps, getting people really excited about it. You saw a bunch of people turn virtually and having to actually put more content out versus having events and having the same people show up to them. And so I still am seeing folks just rebranding sales ops as a RevOps. I think we're going to start to see that smooth out a little bit more over the next couple of years, because the question really is, what is the scope of RevOps? Where should you play? And I think that's what is on our onus at the companies we're going into to help. Just like you're doing thought leadership for a prospect or customer, we need to drive that thought leadership and help the rest of the company get on board with where we could help be the glue for them.
So focusing on that point, I've noticed there are some common paths into this space. Some people in sales ops in particular come in through finance. In your case, it feels more like through the Salesforce CRM world. In marketing ops, it's all over the map. It's like theater majors and English majors like me. So we're a weird bunch. But in your case, it seems more through the technical side. How has your perspective on like what you do and what it's for evolved as your scope has expanded over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question, and super relevant for how my role, even in my last 5.5 years here at Zappy, has evolved. But I do take a more technical lens. Like, my superpower is connecting the dots between journeys, teams, through that intersection of technology and data insights. I've always been enamored by tech, back to the AIM days and all those lovely dial-ups and burning CDs and everything I could do to learn about that. And I feel like that was my way of incorporating that into the value I bring to a company. But it's also really powerful. And especially in this Rev Stack space, it has exploded. Salesforce really led the charge with all their partner economy of all these point solutions you needed to buy because Salesforce didn't do it themselves, but everyone went to Salesforce. And then you see now in the last 3 years, and you're only going to see it more expand with those big name companies, is the platformatization. I just probably made that word up and it was very difficult to say, so I'm not going to say it again. But, everyone's moving to figure back out the platform because you have finance teams cutting down budgets all over the place. It's a lot easier to sell in a platform sale than I need 5 tools to do this one process. And it just really, it's been the more data and technology out there, the more productivity suck it is for your operations teams to try to figure out the integrations, keep data hygiene across all those different systems, keep enablement streamlined across all those different systems. And that's been a challenge at Zappy even. But it's also because I've taken that technical insight, it's helped broaden my horizon of who else at a company we can help impact change with and impact revenue or cost savings. So I've worked our support teams to try to figure out they're interacting day to day with our go-to-market frontline teams. How are we making sure their interactions and workflows and technology are up to par?
And you mentioned kind of thought leadership and evangelizing what you do internally. How do you try to position your team to the rest of the company?
Yeah, always the beautiful challenge. I think the big topic in RevOps space is like, how do you get a seat at the table, right? I'm not going to stand here and say we've nailed it. And it's a constant growth journey. We just had our RevOps offsite here in Boston, so it was an onsite, but we had a bunch of people from all over the country and London come in and just really talk about some of that exact challenge. And for us, we have set up special meetings where it brings all the go-to-market leaders together to talk about tough topics. And we work through solutions with those go-to-market leaders. So we're helping to make a name for ourselves that we can guide them through problem statements. What is the impact of that problem? What's the optimal solution to drive the optimal outcome? And just trying to even reframe from, I'm sure a lot of folks listening might have the same challenge where you have a sales or a marketing or CS leader come up to you with their solution to the problem they perceive that they have. They haven't really identified what the root cause of the problem is, but there's a lot of chatter going on and it's got to be a big problem. Here's how we solve it. So our challenge and how we're trying to get that seat at the table is reframing those problem statements with the leaders. So, hey, I hear you. I can imagine you're having a really frustrating time here. Let's try to understand why that's happening before we just change an account team structure. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's us bringing not saying I told you so, but bringing a failed experiment back to leadership and saying, hey, here's how we were recommending to approach it. Had we gone down that route, here's what we could have done differently or avoided. Here's how we recommend to fix the problem. So something like account structure, right? A great example of that is, you might have most of your revenue coming from your existing customers. Most classic SaaS thing. It's easy because you know the people and it's easy to do that job. It's harder to go find new people to make more money and expand that share of wallet at a company. And so we had that challenge and it was like, okay, we are really bad at expansion revenue in these existing customers. And we know that's a warmer path than trying to get a bunch of new logos. So we're going to just create an expansion team. And then one of the problems we already had was how does account management and CS work really well together? So now you've added a third player into that account team. And within a quarter, we were quickly able to see, okay, that adding another person to an existing problem was not the proper solution, but maybe there was some skill set challenges. We need to address that with enablement. Maybe there was some prioritization issues with what we were giving those teams for insights or what to focus on. We can address those things. So hopefully that answered a little bit, but those are some ways we're trying to build that trust and build that value and build the confidence in coming and working with us versus I think a lot of teams I've dealt with that have never worked with RevOps, you step in and ask some discovery questions, right? And they're like, oh God, this is slowing everything down. avoid Danielle at all costs. She's going to slow down any progress. And I was like, no, I'm actually trying to ask some important questions so we can move faster.
It's a retraining, I think, especially if you have leaders that are more in the like RevOps is here, like, generate my report for me and load those CSVs, and can you get me a coffee while you're at, like, viewing the team as a service provider and changing that dynamic to one of partnership and sort of consultative collaboration. Have you found that once you have broken the ice there, that people are generally receptive, or is it a significant change management cycle that you're going through?
I would say it has been a significant change management cycle, but we are seeing progress. The other thing is the team was a lot smaller in previous years. So when you don't have the bandwidth to pick up all those challenges, you are slowing down progress on some areas. So we were able to make more of an argument to leadership team that we needed folks to support some of these other areas. That the classic thing when you start bringing operations into a RevOps combined team, we still actually have a CS ops person, a sales ops person, a marketing ops person. The idea is that they're non-biased. They're sitting with us because they can see all sides of what's going on with the data, the insights, and the subjective side of all that, right? And they're not necessarily running at whatever the head of sales wants, the head of CS wants, the head of marketing wants, without talking amongst each other. And so we have been able to adjust the majority of those leaders, but then you have a new leader come into leadership team that's learning the company, learning your teams, learning how to adjust how they're used to working and what made them successful and hired at this company. And you have to kind of start from scratch again, right? So from our perspective, our job's never done. And it's always going to be a component of our job description is ensuring that we are working towards being that strategic partner, not customer support. I think I joked at the last conference I went to that someone asked us to say what we did without using the word sales or marketing. And I said babysat, which sounds a little rude, but when you look at some of the the things that come into that point.
It is a perennial challenge. And so you touched on your team structure, and why don't we go there? Maybe you can just outline for us quickly, like, what is the structure today? And I'm curious where it evolved from. Was there a unification at some point, like a big change?
The last unification actually happened this year. So 5.5 years ago, I came in, it was myself and a Salesforce admin. And it was kind of figure out what we need for RevOps before we go give you a bunch of hires or buy a bunch of shit. And so I appreciate that because the previous company I'd been at, I came in, I had the same directive. And within 2 months, I must have shown enough value because all of a sudden they wanted me to hire 10 people. And I was like, I don't have enough clarity on what those 10 roles would do just yet. I could tell you 2 people right now what we need, but it's probably another quarter of doing discovery and trying to fix some of the stuff that's already there before I could confidently say what to do with the other 8. And it was like, nope, we're hiring them. You got the roles. If you don't hire them, you lose them. And so we hired and we figured it out, and it had some chaos, but we worked it through. And when I came to Zappy, that was something that I was really excited that they maintained the like, hey, get a lay of the land and really be the recommender of what we need here. So the next hire was an enablement hire, which actually we took over from sales. It was a sales manager that, quite frankly, just loved onboarding new reps and would rather help upskill the reps around him than sell. And so that was an easy transition. And so he ended up heading up our enablement for the last 4 years. And so from there, we were a really lean team for my first good 2.5 years here. And around the fall 2020, I finally got an influx of folks to join. So when we were able to get those roles approved, because we tracked all of the incoming requests and projects and bandwidth that we needed for each of these areas, we decided to split our RevOps into pillars. So with our RevOps team, we have a performance pillar, which is your analysts. They're analyzing everything around our funnel metrics, sales metrics, your CS revenue metrics, marketing metrics. And then we have our systems team, which is focusing on the whole, how do we optimize, integrate, and ensure fit for purpose of our rev stack. And then we also have our enablement team. which is designated around our sales CS space.
And within those pillars, are there kind of like a stack bar chart? Do you have like marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops within them, or are there people that cover multiple scopes?
Yeah, so we have a few folks that can do it all, so to say. Not a lot, to be honest. And that's actually was one of our topics of our offsite of like, does our structure still make sense? Are people getting the most out of the structure, even on our team for professional growth? Because we do have a dedicated CS ops director, right? And he was sharing that, I used to do a lot more technology focused stuff in my last job. And here I'm focusing more on reporting and analytics and some program management for our CS team. And he's like, I don't have time to do the tech stuff. And we have a team that is dedicated to it. So I don't really need to. But he wants to flex those muscles, right? So that's the evolution for our own team we're trying to work in, is how do you create more of those cross skill set sharing and enablement for our own team so that no one feels like they're like one of those muscles they were really honing in before they got to Zappy is now going to be atrophying, right? But then my marketing ops hire came from a bit more of a diverse background and came in, and he really wants to focus on the marketing side, but then eventually get more generalist RevOps. I will admit it's been a challenge to figure out how best to support turning someone that's been pillar focused or team specific focused into a more generalist RevOps, because their inclination is to first think about a sales metric, right? Or I need to get this out, and then CS is an afterthought. But what I've been trying to add to our team's dynamic is, hey, director of sales ops, you want to roll out this process. Awesome. Have you connected with our director of CS ops to see where there's a CS synergy there? Or, hey, we want to roll out a CSQL. That's only going to be successful if we also bring along the account management team, because what actually happened when we launched it was we launched CSQLs to our CS team. Great idea, right? They're talking to these users all the time. They're going to get more of those tidbits of sales triggers than a sales rep might get having an actual sales conversation. So that was our way of saying, hey, a little alley-oop for our sales team, because the more they bring in, the more revenue CS can burn down. And so it's a like nice synergy there, but then it was like an afterthought to tell the AMs about this. So they started getting these CSQL alerts. They had no idea what to do with them. They were losing them, creating their own opportunities. It was more chaotic, but the idea was correct. But we needed to ourselves have that synergy better. And so that's like my favorite example to use with the team of like, hey, had we worked together to launch this, we could have seen a lot more value earlier on.
Last November, I watched as my LinkedIn feed blew up with posts from people at Mopsapalooza. They were raving about the conference and having the best time. Don't miss out like I did. This November, Mopsapalooza is back in sunny Anaheim, California, and it's going to be the marketing ops event of the year, packed with hands-on learning from real practitioners. This is the only truly community-led, tech-agnostic MOPS conference out there. It's got the best speakers, the best networking, the best social events, maybe even a trip to Disneyland. This isn't your 50,000-person tech company conference. It's an intimate gathering of folks who are in the trenches every day, and registration is capped at 700 attendees. Tickets are going fast, so go to revops.fm/mops. That's revops.fm/MOPS to sign up today. I love that you have a performance pillar and you call it that. Like, people often have analysts, but I find that the way that at least that they're positioned and talking about it, it's kind of, they will run reports, they'll provide information, sometimes as requested, sometimes proactively. But having the autonomy or the responsibility to proactively attempt to drive performance is not always there. It seems more rare. Talk about how that works and the sorts of how they think about their job relative to performance and driving impact.
We definitely have an element of the reactive. And I will say our sales ops director, I think they thought at offsite was our head of sales golf caddy, which actually you could compare the two, because he should be supporting the strategy to sink a hole in one. But anyways, yeah, and the performance element of that, it's not just building reports and dashboards and delivering what's asked of them, or even saying, hey, I want to get ahead of this metric over here. But it's looking at what are our company strategies, where are our pain points, what are we doing really well, everything that might not even be like, okay, here's our marketing funnel, but we're seeing poor engagement rates on our outbound team. An easy thing to do, and a bunch of people have, is point at the technology or point at our domain credibility or all these things that aren't something that's more subjective, which is, and that's what our performance pillar does start to look at. Okay, what are we looking at for subject lines? What titles are you reaching out to? So look deeper, not just the numbers you're looking at, but really what are the things that are beyond the numbers and how are those contributing to the numbers? So, okay, look at the cohort of titles you're reaching out to and how frequently. And if we adjust these titles more towards our persona over here, are you going to see higher engagement rates? Or, hey, we just implemented 6 cents in Q4. That has some account scoring we could be utilizing to prioritize which contacts at those accounts you reach out to rather than blasting all 50 contacts.
And to me, that example is a good case in point of why a unified structure can work, or at least one in which there is a division of labor, because if you are responsible for systems and bug tickets and daily support requests, like that sort of stuff is always more of a luxury unless there's like a really pressing fire and somebody is an executive is really making it a priority, but otherwise it tends to get pushed to the side. And here you have people that it sounds like have the mind share and the time to actually really focus on that, which I think is great.
Yeah, and time management, I think, is a challenge for any role, to be honest, especially RevOps. I like to think of RevOps as, I always used to train sales reps and say, hey, your book of business, you're a GM of this portion of Zappy, right? Like you are the CEO or GM of this. Like you have control. You need to keep your house clean. You need to show revenue on this. And just like operating a company. But I really, truly believe a RevOps team is many departments at a company. We are the marketers. We are the BDRs. We are the sales reps. We are customer success and training, implementation. We're product. We're BI. So time is the most precious element for us. And that's something that I think is always a constant battle that we're trying to work towards. I think the biggest thing our team has tried to implement is like time boxing and just like taking back control of your calendar. Some are better than others. I actually kind of suck at it myself. I'll time box it and then I'll just take a call with whoever needs help.
So coming to time, it brings us to planning and prioritization and when that sort of thing happens. And you mentioned, one of the benefits of the unified structure is that the team can kind of plan together, or at least discuss things together, rather than just being solely responsive to the head of their functional area. How do you approach that process? Maybe how often, and finding that balance between having that centralized planning process and then still ensuring that those functional leaders feel heard, feel that their needs are being taken care of, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we have members of our team that actually sit in to the different departmental leadership team meetings. And then enablement actually joins in and does specific rep level trainings as well and feedback loops. And then we also have a biweekly, what we call the go-to-market leadership team, where we do start to say, okay, here's our go-to-market roadmap. Here are the things we really need to land in Q1, 2, 3, 4. Here's where we are around it. Here's what departments really need to own it. We live and die by the DRI, direct responsible individual. We really try to ensure there is a DRI on any initiative that gets put on that board with a solid understanding of what are we trying to drive as an outcome. So if you don't have a desired outcome or clear aligned problem statement, it's likely not getting onto our go-to-market roadmap until you work together with who you need to actually make it an item. And we're constantly having those prioritization conversations, whether or not they're in one of those already planned meetings, or if we have to jump on an ad hoc meeting and be like, hey, there's a fire over here. If we need to solve it right now, that means we're going to drop these other things we are working on currently. It doesn't mean it's the same as a sales adage of no doesn't mean no forever. It means no for now. So it's working through how to articulate, hey, these things will get done, but probably a month later than you were expecting so that we can solve for this. Is this really as big of an issue? Here's the data we have around. We try to do as much discovery and have as much evidence behind why something should trump another priority. We also have a leadership team where if things are really not working out here, they hash it out and then do a top down of, hey, this is where we're going to go with this initiative. This initiative is going to drop off till next quarter.
It's one of the pushbacks that I typically see against unification of operations on LinkedIn is the functional leaders feeling that their ops isn't responsive to them, and then maybe they try to claw it back, or you get to sort of the IT-ification, if you like. Have you dealt with that at all, like with leaders feeling that way?
Oh, for sure. Especially at Zappy, where we didn't have, RevOps was me for a few years, and then we actually had functional operational support. And it's interesting, our head of customer, I joke with him all the time about this now, because now we actually have a dedicated CS ops person. He feels a lot better about it. But my first 3 years here, he was like, Danielle, I just feel like all you do is give your time to sales, and it's just not fair. And what do I need to do differently? And I was like, I think it's more what I need to do differently. I wasn't properly communicating all the things I was doing for the CS team because they weren't super visible. So when I got to Zappy, the CS team were glorified CRM admins. So we're consumption-based SaaS. So all the projects that were running on our platform, which would be RevRec, CS reps were asked to manually input those as opportunities in Salesforce. So that's a massive time suck. So I was spending a ton of time, more time probably than with sales, working with product on how do we have this Cadillac of a CRM that integrates across technologies pretty easily at this point in time, Salesforce. And why are we not utilizing the benefits of those integrations? Can we automate some of these tasks? They're definitely automatable. So it was really, I wasn't making my roadmap or where I was spending my time visible enough or communicating enough. So that's the one piece of advice. Like, if you think you're communicating enough, you're not.
How have you found it? Like, you were in IC for a while. It sounds like wearing all the hats. And I know what that world is like. And then transitioning from that to being executive, having a team, it's a totally different mindset, totally different scope of responsibilities. Has that been a challenging journey at all, or how have you found it?
It is. I'm the type of personality where I think I'll always be in a size of company where I get my hands dirty. I've done a lot of soul searching in the last couple of years, and I'm like, I just want to focus on strategy and delivering on that. And at the end of the day, we also had a RIF last year, so I went back to being a bit of an IC just for bandwidth's sake if we were going to keep up with the roadmap. I struggle sometimes to get my head out of the weeds a little bit more than I should. Actually, I had an executive coach last year who really helped me try to rebrand myself internally because I have sales reps who think I sit on finance team right now because we don't have a deal desk. And when people struggle around the structure of their deal or getting it through the system or whatnot, they tag in our team. And I'm the only one on our team that knows the intricacies of the billing and financial side. Most of my initiatives are on the strategy side, but then I can dive down and actually solution build from those initiatives. I can QA, I can help guide a solution, and I usually get tagged in when my team gets stuck. And I put that out there to them all the time. We have a very open communication, and that's something I've always enjoyed with managers I've had. And what I always want to be for my team is just as hyper transparent as I can be. And I'm available. But transparent with that time. So if I really can't pick something up or I can't be there for them, they're aware of it ahead of time. Or if they're going through something, they know I'm there to step in. Maybe they're hitting a roadblock. I'm happy to come be the bad guy for a little bit. I don't want my team to ever feel like they're on that pushback side of the stick too far. They have to push back because with ops, if we didn't push back, we'd literally never sleep. But yeah, just trying to be the right amount of coach to that team, the right amount of strategic vision for the high initiatives, and the right amount of being able to get my hands dirty. I don't have a great answer for how I do it successfully.
You mentioned soul searching. It's interesting. Like, I entered the professional world, it looks like around the same year as you, so similar kind of length of career. And I also have thought a lot about over time, what makes me happy, like the sort of work, where you don't feel like it's work, you're just really enthusiastic and engaged, the sort of work where it doesn't feel like that. And when you start out, you don't really realize that working for a 10,000 person company is just a completely different thing than working for a 300 or 400 person company or a 20 person company. And I've kind of seen all those sizes. For people that are listening, maybe just it could be useful to talk about like what that soul searching process was like, how you sort of identified your happy place, because maybe not everyone has fully like become self-aware, I guess, of those things within themselves.
No, it's a great question, and done a lot of that. Like I said, recently, a little bit more actually helping my little sister. She got laid off in November and had to do the same thing. Do I stay in this tech space? Do I go back to pre-med? Do I, where do I go? And it always comes back to me now. In my 20s, I chased success. Throughout my 20s and early 30s, it was like, how can I continue to evolve my career, whether that be pay, title, contributions to a company, whatnot. My sweet spot is around that like 150 to 400 person company. I will say that Iron Mountain was a little bit of I had no idea how that thing was set up. I don't think they do. But just really thinking about, it sounds so basic, but what gets you up in the morning? It's the people I'm working with. How motivated are they? Are they as passionate about the success of the company that I am? Because if not, I'm going to burn the crap out and I'm going to feel more negative emotions versus like dopamine rush around the things I'm contributing. And I have gotten to that burnout. I will say, like, Zappy has had several evolutions in the last 5.5 years. We are not the same company that I joined. And so with that, inevitably, you're going to have different people you're working with different motivational drivers, and really trying to come back to what motivated me in the first place. Culture is huge. How people first is the company, and is it just marketing, or are they actually people first? Zappy is people first, probably to our detriment at some points, because there's probably some people we should have parted ways with along the path that were low performers. That we are people first, and we give people the benefit of the doubt. Work-life balance, and this could just be me getting older, but life is way more important than work. I mean, money is great, and it helps you afford a life that you want. But at the end of the day, if you have to skip 2 meetings to go see a recital, or you have a gorgeous day and you've been working 60-hour weeks and you want to go to the beach for the afternoon, like, log off and go do it and take care of your mental sanity. Those are things I know I'm never going to be chastised or judged at Zappy for doing. I mean, if I did it all the time, yeah, I'll be judged for it. But, it's something where we're really people first, and that's important. The work I'm doing, I like the balance of being able to make strategic recommendations, plan out a roadmap, but also actually pick up some of those initiatives myself. Some of the soul searching was like, okay, if I were just sitting in a C-level position and not really getting my hands dirty, will I be satisfied enough? And I am no longer a competitive athlete, but I came up as from age 3 doing gymnastics, competitive athletics, like whatever I put my all into, I needed to see a tangible result around. And so for me, keeping some of that hands in the game helps me feel that rush.
Oh, it is. I mean, I think it's super important because, yeah, there's certain things, like, it's fine to want a title, it's fine to want higher income, but you have to understand what actually makes you happy in the job. And there was one thing that I really appreciated about being in the consulting world was you kind of got a rotating tour of duty through companies of all sizes. And sometimes you saw that, like, oh, these cool brands, it would like look so cool on a resume to work there. And then you see inside how like a 10,000 person company works, the chaotic and the pace of change is so slow, and everything's about, the meeting for the meeting for the meeting to make the PowerPoint for the next meeting. I was like, okay, I see that actually for me, and some people thrive at navigating in that environment, and that's a skill set that I respect very much. But you kind of learn where your happy place is. So I think it's cool to like consciously do that process, because I don't think I did for a while.
Yeah, and I think it's healthy. I did not do it. I burnt out multiple times in my career of just literally burning the midnight oil. I would wake up 5:30, work out, get to work, come home, have dinner, open my laptop, turn on the TV, and work until 1 a.m. And then I would do it all again. I'm not going to lie, doing that didn't get me the opportunities I got. The opportunities I've achieved in my career could have happened without working 80-hour weeks on some of these things and setting better boundaries up front. So that's the other thing I have learned is, like, be in an environment where you can set those boundaries and you can stick to them and people respect that. And that's something where, again, I didn't really think about culture or how those folks around you care about how you show up or whatnot. And like here, I have people I've been working with for 5 years that will see me on a call and I'll get a Slack and I'll get a, hey, is everything okay? They just know like a facial change, or I wasn't talking as much because I don't know how to shut up. You were really quiet on that call. Everything okay? And just like those little things you wouldn't get, at a bigger company. Not necessarily. I mean,
that's really nice.
Your work friends, but yeah, it's taking stock continually. Because again, especially if you're in a faster moving company, that company that you started with is not the company you're probably currently at still. The hard part is if all of a sudden you look at that list of what gets me up and doesn't get me up in the morning, and what doesn't get me up is getting higher, right? It's hard to leave that situation. But at the end of the day, I'll say it again, the life side of it, the mental side of it is so much more important.
You can only drain those reserves for so long. And then, you crash and burn at some point. We've talked about the last 15 years of RevOps. Let's talk about the next 15 years. Or probably nobody knows what's going to happen in the next 15 years. But even the next 5 years would be interesting. And I'm curious for your take, and you can take it in any direction you want, whether it's the technology, the role of RevOps within the company and how it will expand or perhaps diminish. What are you seeing and what are you thinking about to prepare yourself for the next phase of your career?
From an aspect of evolving where RevOps sits at a company, I truly do believe it will get more of a seat at the table. You see the PE firms really focusing on how strong your operation teams are. They're just as curious and involved with how your RevOps teams are set up and what they're doing and what they're producing as they are with what target numbers your sales and CS teams and marketing teams are hitting. So I think especially in this kind of like, I guess, mid-market-ish world of a lot of PE firms are buying up a lot of these SaaS companies, you're going to see that push more towards RevOps getting a larger seat at the table. They're even having RevOps advisors start joining in and being contributors. So that's something I'm excited to see because it's been missing and it's been a slog. It's been really hard to sit in front of a CEO and make a business proposition about why they should listen to our recommendation versus just having the head of sales yell louder, right? So that's something I'm excited to see. I'm not even going to touch the AI subject because I think everyone's still trying to figure that out. Like, I know that every single webinar and event is like, AI. I've been playing around with a lot. Everyone's still figuring it out. It's TBD. I like what Gong's doing with their AI. I'll say that. I think it's intentional and actually blending into the already processes you're doing around deal reviews or call reviews. So I hope to see it more embedded into what we're already focused on a little bit, or introducing new things that maybe RevOps wasn't the leader on, and we can actually use that to get more of a seat at the table. On a technology standpoint of like how we're managing, I think you're seeing a lot more tech savvy RevOps folks probably coming in more from the Salesforce admin into more of a generalist RevOps space because they see all of the requests coming in and they start to learn what a good and bad process looks like. And they start to learn what good or bad metrics look like, how to actually analyze a dashboard, not just create one, just naturally. And seeing, I think, RevOps take on more of that go-to-market stack and be the voice of that technology stack a bit more, vendor management, all that piece. Like even at Zappy, we just kicked off a big tech audit, and it's really incredible to see the different people from the different departments that have been nominated to join this tech audit. And the tech audit is, yes, auditing all the tech we have at the company, but is it fit for purpose? Do we have redundancies? Do we have the proper security reviews on these? Because some things were brought in 5 years ago before we really had a strong data privacy team. Now that team is like probably our most standard operating procedures, have some really cool stuff, and they're like super easy to work with, which I know most people probably don't say about their data privacy. I love them. They're one of my favorite partners internally. But with that, you're starting to see even like folks on our IT team that don't know the first thing about picking a technology or true vendor management. They're very tech savvy and they can troubleshoot a bunch of technology issues, but actually evaluating what the right tech for your company at this time in your journey is and how you might evolve with it or not And then also the ongoing relationship and vendor management. How are we getting the maximum out of this as we evolve? Are we evolving with them? I really have found like RevOps folks are so much more ingrained in that these days because like that's been a core piece of our job.
No, I think you're right. I'm seeing all those things too. I think it's a good time to be in RevOps. Maybe last thing, just to weigh in on this. RevOps, GTM Ops, there's a push for another rebranding going on, and I'm curious for your take on that.
I had a LinkedIn post about maybe a year ago, actually. It might have been like last April, where I was trying to get people agitated by that. Like, what do you think about GTM Ops and that being the next evolution of RevOps? I'm very bullish that that's where it's going to rebrand next. My post got no engagement, which means I just actually need a better personal brand.
Well, you're so far ahead of your time that people were just like, I can't even understand this yet.
Like, what's GTM? But yeah, I do think that would be a natural evolution for that.
Well, such a pleasure to speak with you today. Thanks for sharing about your journey. And yeah, hope we'll stay connected and touch base again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Hey everyone, I want to invite you over to the RevOps FM Substack community, where you can sign up to get rough transcripts, show notes, longer form articles, and other bonus content. Just head over to revops.fm/subscribe to get free access. I'd also love to know what you thought of the episode and to hear suggestions for topics you want to learn about. Feel free to leave a comment on Substack or send me an email at justin@revops.fm. Thanks for listening.